Ever think about how much you can learn about a person just from their Wikipedia page?
Interesting question.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into one boxer's life, Tyan Booth, and it's really pretty fascinating.
Oh, I know Tyan Booth. He's got a really interesting story.
So we're going to be exploring all the twists and turns of his career, all from this single Wikipedia article.
Just goes to show you can find some really compelling narratives in the most unexpected places.
Exactly. You don't always need some big fancy documentary to uncover a good story.
Yeah.
So Tyan Booth, he was born in Nottingham, right?
That's right.
But then his family moved to Sheffield, which, for those who don't know, is kind of a boxing hub.
Yeah, Sheffield has a rich history of boxing.
So he's in this new city, surrounded by this sport, and you start to think, classic underdog story, right?
That seems like it, right? But here's the thing. It's not your typical underdog tale.
Oh, how so?
Well, Booth was very intentional about his boxing idols. He really admired boxers like Nassim Hamad and Johnny Nelson.
And what's interesting about those two, they were known for their resilience, for their tactical fighting styles, not just some kind of scrappy, come from behind kind of thing.
Exactly. And that suggests a certain level of, I don't know, calculated ambition maybe, even from the very beginning.
So he was already thinking strategically, even in who he looked up to.
I think so.
And that makes his early career even more interesting.
Because it's a mix of wins and losses.
Yeah, like a real mixed bag.
Yeah.
You see him up against guys like Jason Wellborn, which Booth won, by the way. But Wellborn later said something that I thought was really curious. He claimed that Booth had a significant weight advantage going into that fight.
The weight game. Always a factor in boxing.
Always. Wellborn said Booth was about a stone heavier.
Oh, wow. A stone, that's what, 14 pounds?
14 pounds, which, let's be honest, in boxing, that can make a huge difference, especially in those lower weight classes.
Oh, absolutely. It can completely change the dynamic of a fight.
And it makes you think, was Booth's team already playing the long game back then? Were they carefully choosing opponents based on these kinds of physical advantages?
It's very possible. I mean, this is a guy who was so determined to make it as a boxer that he was willing to, get this, sleep on floors in Sheffield just to be closer to his gym.
Wow.
Yeah, talk about dedication.
Wow. That's commitment right there. But even with that strategic approach, those early fights, he didn't always come out on top. Take his fight against Darren Gethin, for example.
Oh, Gethin, he was a tough one.
Gethin, he was known as this relentless pressure fighter. And Booth, he started out strong, but Gethin just wore him down over 10 rounds.
Yeah, Gethin, he was known for his stamina.
Then, bam, knockout punch in the 10th round.
Yeah.
The Wikipedia article says Booth never saw it coming.
Wow, and that really underscores something crucial about boxing, especially as fighters get older. It's one thing to have that tactical awareness, but endurance, that ability to take punches and keep going round after round, that becomes so essential.
It's interesting because it's almost like your past fights, all those blows you take, they kind of stay with you in a way, influencing how you perform in the present.
Yeah, it's like this accumulation of experience, both physically and mentally, that shapes you as a fighter.
It really is. Okay, so now Booth's career takes him international. His next fight, he's all the way over in Montreal, Canada, going up against Julien Marisson.
And he wins. By split decision, though.
Split decision.
Right.
Which is interesting in itself. But what I found really interesting is what Marisson said about Booth after the fight.
Oh, really? What'd he say?
He was talking about how elusive Booth was in the ring, how difficult it was to actually land a clean shot on him.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that elusiveness, it often comes down to footwork, defensive tactics. It's like Booth understood the power of not always engaging directly, of controlling the pace, dictating the terms of the fight.
Yeah, he wasn't just about brute force. There was a real art to his fighting.
Exactly. So we're starting to see a more nuanced picture of him emerge. He's not just a power puncher or a brawler. There's this calculated finesse to his style.
Absolutely.
Which in some ways might have contributed to one of the most controversial moments in his entire career. His disqualification against Chelo Renda.
Oh, yeah. That was a messy one. This whole Renda fight, it really makes you question Booth's legacy,
It really does.
Yeah.
Because, according to the Wikipedia article, at least Renda, he flat out accused Booth of fighting dirty.
Yeah, headbutts. Right.
Yeah, headbutts. And Renda was so adamant that Booth was intentionally tricking to injure him that he actually refused to keep fighting.
Wow.
The article doesn't really give us all the nitty-gritty details of what went down in the ring, but it does say that Booth, he insisted he was fighting fair and square.
And that's where it gets really tricky, right? Was Booth being deliberately dirty, trying to get ahead no matter what, Or, and this is a possibility, was it just a clash of styles?
Yeah, like maybe Renda was misinterpreting what Booth was doing in the ring.
Exactly. And you can't help but wonder how much of that misinterpretation, if that's what it was, stems from those earlier accusations of Booth having a weight advantage.
Oh, interesting. So it's like this cloud of suspicion following him.
Right, exactly. Because you have to remember, perception matters as much as reality in the boxing world, you know? And this Renda thing, it kind of casts this shadow over the rest of Booth's career, even when he's in the ring with some big names later on.
Like Chris Eubank Jr., for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Eubank Jr., Marcus Morrison, these are big fights, but you can't help but wonder, are people looking at Booth differently because of what happened with Renda?
And it's not like he was this unknown fighter by that point. He had a reputation. Even Eubank Sr., I mean, talk about a legend, even he recognized Booth's skill.
What'd he say? Remind me.
He called him very experienced, said he knew how to play out the time, stay out of range.
Huh. That's high praise coming from someone like Eubank Sr., especially after everything with Renda.
So even though Booth loses those later fights, he's still earning respect from some corners.
It's like they saw something in him that maybe the general public or even some of his opponents didn't or couldn't. But then, of course, there's that whole social media incident toward the end of his career, and that's a little harder to just brush aside.
It's true. We haven't even touched on that yet. According to the Wikipedia page, his boxing license was suspended back in 2018.
Yep, for making some controversial comments online.
Yeah, the article, it doesn't go into a ton of detail, just that it was related to another boxer's death.
Which, you know, it's a good reminder that athletes, they're not just athletes, they're public figures too, with a platform, and their words, they carry weight.
It's a lot of responsibility. And it makes you think, did Booth understand that? Did he really grasp the potential consequences of what he was saying, especially given the circumstances?
It's tough to say, but it definitely adds another layer to his story, wouldn't you say? This idea that who someone is inside the ring, it's not always who they are outside of it.
It's like we're piecing together this whole puzzle, but there are some pieces missing.
And isn't that kind of how it always is with people, though? You get these glimpses into their lives, these moments, but the full picture, it's always a bit of a mystery.
That's so true. But that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating to me. We started with just this Wikipedia page, right? And now we're here talking about intent, legacy, the impact of what people say, what they do. It's pretty profound when you think about it.
It really is. It just goes to show you can find these really thought-provoking stories in the most unlikely of places.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our Tyan Booth deep dive here, what's your big takeaway? What really stood out to you about his story?
You know, for me, it's a good reminder that someone's story doesn't just end when their career ends, you know? Booth's journey, with all its ups and downs, all the triumphs, the controversies, it's still sparking debate, even now. I think that's pretty powerful.
I agree. And it makes you wonder how much of our own lives are shaped by how people see us versus who we actually are.
It's that age-old question, isn't it? Perception versus reality. And I don't think there's an easy answer.
Probably not.
Mm-mm.
But maybe it's not about finding the right answer, you know? Maybe it's about being okay with the complexity of it all, recognizing that people, we're not all good or all bad, we're just a mix.
Just like Tyan Booth.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, next time you come across a name you don't recognize, a story that seems pretty straightforward at first glance, remember Tyan Booth. There's always more to uncover, more to learn if you just take the time to dig a little deeper. And that's what these deep dives are all about. Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and most importantly, never stop learning.